Last week on Reel to Reel, we featured some of the experiences of our diocesan pilgrims as they traveled to the Holy Land with Catholic Communications. This week, reporter Terry Hegarty recounts the active ministry of Jesus, visiting places that we've heard about all of our lives in the gospel stories. Reporting now from the Mount of Beatitudes.
In recent days, just 2 weeks after our diocesan pilgrims arrived home, violence flared up in the Holy Land. Responding to missile attacks from within the Gaza Strip in the southeast corner of Israel, which have reached as far as just south of Jerusalem, Israeli Defense Forces launched their own artillery shells at Hamas military targets. The violence stands in stark contrast to the holiness and the spirit of peace, which was so abundant in the sacred sites of the Holy Land for our pilgrims such a short time ago. Well into their week-long journey to Israel, the pilgrims from the Diocese of Springfield had seen and heard a lot about the Holy Land. Following a cruise on the Sea of Galilee, the pilgrims disembarked from the boat, climbed aboard their tour bus, and ascended the Mount of Beatitudes, enjoying spectacular views of the surrounding landscape and the Sea of Galilee, which is actually a large freshwater lake. Here, Jesus performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes and delivered the Sermon on the Mount. As the pilgrims celebrated Mass together in this historic location, the readings of the day couldn't have been more appropriate.
Blessed who are the sorrowing, they shall be consoled. Blessed are the lowly, they shall inherit the land.
Especially in this year of faith, visiting places such as Nazareth, Cana, and here at the Mount of Beatitudes allows the stories of the Gospels, stories we've heard our whole lives, come into our hearts in a whole new way.
I loved the Beatitudes when we were up on the hill and just looking down at the water and all the flowers and the Mass. The Mass really came alive for me.
After descending the Mount of Beatitudes, the pilgrims were allowed to rest in a place where Jesus also rested, Capernaum, a town that he called home for a time. Dominic DeMello and his mother especially enjoyed their time in the Holy Land because this was the third attempt they had made to get there.
We've been trying to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land for several years. We've made 3 prior attempts, and unfortunately all of them fell through for one reason or another. This time, however, we were very successful, and I'm thrilled to say that we've had a wonderful pilgrimage here in the Holy Land.
In Capernaum, the pilgrims learned even more about the Middle East.
The land of Israel has been a bridge between 2 major civilizations. On one hand, we have the land of the pharaohs, Egypt in the south. The northeast, we have Asia Minor, Fertile Crescent, and Europe. If you want to go from one side to the other, you have to go through that tiny bridge called the Holy Land or the land of Israel.
Visitors got an up-close view of an ancient temple built upon the remains of what is known as the Synagogue of Jesus. It was here that Jesus delivered the discourse on the bread of life, assuring followers that the manna from heaven came not from Moses, but from God the Father. The house of St. Peter's mother-in-law was right next door. The modern St. Peter Church was just built in 1995 over the house, which was excavated in the early 20th century. Inside the engineering marvel, a glass floor allows visitors to see the main part of the ancient home. A larger-than-life statue of St. Peter stands guard just inside the grounds.
My feeling personally is I think every Catholic should have that opportunity. And really it's a great way not only to improve your faith personally, but to be able to bring it back to your family. There's just nothing like it.
Following the stop in Capernaum, the pilgrims and even one reporter got the chance to wade in the water at the banks of the Jordan River. Historians and biblical scholars don't know exactly where on the 156-mile-long river that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. A visit to one part of the surprisingly narrow waterway was meaningful for the pilgrims all the same. The physical rigors of the trip presented a challenge to several of the pilgrims, but they didn't let those challenges get them down.
Well, we certainly have had very busy days, waking up at the crack of dawn and going to bed fairly late. And yes, we are tired, I think, and I think my mother will attest to that. But it's well worth it. It was moving and very spiritual.
Spirituality was abundant right from the start of one of the days as the group began their tour with a trip to the top of the 1,900-foot Mount Tabor. But the tour bus could only travel part of the way up the mountain. A smaller, more agile vehicle was needed to tackle the rest of the steep, narrow trail that features numerous hairpin turns. And if you're looking for adventure in Israel, the series of hairpin turns up Mount Tabor should do the trick. In fact, there's an old joke about the treacherous mountain pass that says the reason that Peter, James, and John wanted to stay at the top of the mountain was because they were afraid of the trip back down. Father Gary and the pilgrims celebrated a morning mass in the Church of the Transfiguration.
It's the voice of God that came this mountain here to declare, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him."
It was here on Mount Tabor that Jesus' face shone like the sun. Moses and Elijah were with him as he was transfigured and his divine nature was revealed. This is truly holy ground. Jesus had taken just 3 of his apostles with him to the summit. After the transfiguration, they wanted to build 3 tents there, one each for Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Today, the church stands in honor of them all. Father Gary says that the feeling of wanting to remain on the holy mountain was compelling.
We had a mountaintop experience on this pilgrimage, but we can't stay here like Peter, James, and John wanted to build 3 tents. We can't stay here. We have to go back. We have to go back to work. We have to go back to our ministry. We have to go back to our families, to our workplace, and to be able to just spread what we have received, to give what we have received from this pilgrimage in the Holy Land.
There are many ingredients to consider when traveling in the Middle East, but in this heat and humidity, the most important is having adequate water. Actually visiting so many holy places was more than a physical experience.
It's just so mystical, walking where Jesus walked. I never thought I'd be here. I keep pinching myself, saying, is this really happening?
This road today, if you look in the map,
Leaving Mount Tabor, the tour continued on to the town of Bethlehem and then to the culmination of the trip, sites in and around Jerusalem. Pilgrims enjoyed stunning views of the old city of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, saw the Garden of Gethsemane, and trekked the same streets through which Jesus carried his cross.
I don't think there's any one thing that was more meaningful than something else. It's the entire pilgrimage. Every day was just so inspirational and so humbling.
More humbling and inspiring sights will be featured next week in our final Holy Land segment. Reporting for Reel to Reel from Israel, this is Terry Hegarty.